house? Well, hey, it needn't be a difficult process once you know you're building on good foundations. Once you start building on the good foundations, well, there's only one way to go, and that is up. This is your new home. Jadine Peterson's home is at last coming off the drawing board and onto the ground. It all starts with the foundations, and that's what's happening in Redwood. On Main North Road, the road cones are out in preparation for the concrete trucks arriving and starting the pour.
Okay, so today we've got the big pour, the concrete floors being poured today. So as part of, because we're on a main route into Christchurch, the traffic's quite congested, so we've actually got to employ traffic management today. As you can imagine, big trucks trying to back in when there's 2 lanes of traffic coming, it's pretty difficult. So traffic management gets employed. We can only do that between 9 AM and 3 PM, I think, so we can't actually start here any earlier. Which is a bit of a bugger because we lose a couple of hours in the morning, really, where we could be doing some work. But it's all about keeping the public safe, keeping our site safe.
The build involves hiring a team to set up the road cones and manage the traffic to ensure the concrete trucks can safely manoeuvre onto the site.
So the guys that are actually pouring the concrete today, the concrete places, they've organised men at work to come down here and set up the traffic management. If we don't do it, we can run the risk of being fined. Obviously the council can come along here and see there's a great deal of activity with some big trucks coming in and out and thinking, well, hang on, that's disrupting the flow of traffic. So it needs to be managed correctly. So it's part of their responsibility to organise traffic management on our behalf for our site. We've just got to give the traffic time to flow into one lane before they get anywhere near our site, and we've got to have access in down the end so that the trucks can come into effectively their own lane, and they've also got to have an exit strategy as well so they can go out the other end and flow into the normal run of traffic.
The road's been closed for Jadine's concrete pour, which wasn't something Jadine expected would happen, nor did she expect it to affect her own travelling plans.
Well, I heard, like, at the start, Justin had said to me, we need to put traffic management into position for your house.
Right.
Main North Road is classed as a highway. I was like, oh, okay.
It gets a little bit busy in the mornings and the evenings.
Yeah, and so it had to be done at certain times. It couldn't be holidays and all that kind of stuff. Like, oh, wow, you know. So they blocked off one lane outside just for trucks and all that kind of stuff. It was standard, it had to happen. Anyway, one day, I'm in a rental just up the road from the house, and I come out by the mobile, and I couldn't get onto Main North Road, and it was like, what is going on? Has there been an accident? Something's happened? Oh my goodness, what's going on? Come out, get to the house, and it took me ages just to get from one end of Main North Road to not even up to St Bede's, and it was my house.
And it was all about you. And
yep,
you didn't
all about me, and I just sat there in the car and just was like, and I was like, yep, that's my house. Yeah, so.
Preparing the site for the foundations has been a more complicated process than it might seem.
Okay, so the process to get to this stage, unfortunately, is a really big dig out. Because the land wasn't too good, it's a bit soft underfoot, we had a 1 metre dig out, which is really, really deep. A lot of soil's come out and a lot of product's gone back in, just so that we can get it to this stage. And that's part of the new building regulations for the earthquake floors today.
So we turn up on site, we mark out the excavation platform. The diggers will come in and dig it out, and we will basically take it from a sand point of view through, boxed, all the steel polystyrene pods, pour the concrete and finish that and strip the floor off and leave it as a finished product. Basically about getting to good ground in varying areas in Christchurch, which you're no doubt aware of. You have to go a lot deeper to get to that good ground and provide yourself with a good gravel raft to build off. Areas like Rolleston and West Melton and all that aren't really subjected to this type of design. This is more based around your newer subdivisions around Christchurch and inner Christchurch. So this is basically a TC2 type foundation.
So far it's taken us just on 2 weeks to get to this stage, and that's primarily because of the extensive dig out. Normally we would have something like this dug out and prepared within a week, but in this case it's a good 2 weeks to get just this far. And the new building regulations are such that you need a riprap floor, and then the rest of the construction is pretty much as per the building code.
Riprap floors aren't something house owners used to know or care about. All that's changed in Christchurch post-quake, with land reclassified and new rules for constructing foundations.
It's built to withstand earthquakes up to a certain level. TC3 is another level again. which obviously everybody's heard of and is aware of, but this wouldn't be sufficient for a TC3 piece of ground. And it would also be overkill for a TC1, if you can follow what I mean. So it's specifically designed for this section. There'll be a soil report done to ascertain what sort of ground it is, and then engineers will design the structural engineers will design the slab based on that soil report. After the floor is prepared, which it is now, then we'll be pouring the concrete. So there's quite a bit of work going in to the polystyrene pods, the steel work. You can see the boys walk around. It's just quite extensive. So next is pouring the concrete, and then we'll have the floor, which is what most people identify with. Most people wouldn't see what goes on underneath their floor, which is what we've got here.
Jadine's been keeping an eye on her build.
Watching the foundations, just the process going through has been amazing. It's and learning heaps every day as well. I don't really understand much about foundations. You know, this is the first time I've ever built a house, so each time just popping down to see the guys or anything like that, they've just answered anything and they've made it really easy. It's been an easy process.
Clients aren't always able to visualise their house rising up from the foundations, which can be a challenge for their builders.
Probably the biggest reaction, or their first reaction, is shivers, it's too big. Is that really my house? Is that how big it's going to be? And it's quite deceiving really when you have a look at the floor. It does look big to start with, but once you get the framing and stuff up, it looks smaller. But no, there's generally no problems. You know, it's pretty seamless at this point. It's actually probably one of the easier parts of the build.
Like I said, this is a TC2 type raft. We've got basically a 385 thick concrete floor, an SE62 mesh on top, which is a 6mm rod in it, 200mm spacings. There's full cages around the perimeter, and you may be able to see in some of the corners, the re-entrant corners, there's beams running in off those as well, which provide a sort of support if there was ever any loss of support in one corner. It effectively cantilevers into the slab. There's a lot more steel in one of these floors than there ever was in a standard foundation prior to the earthquakes. Probably twice as much.
I'm just looking forward mainly to seeing Jadine in a brand spanking new home, and honestly, compared to the old villa that she was in, this will be quite different. It will be warmer, drier, a lot more comfortable for her. I hope she's a good cook, because we're putting a good kitchen in, so I'm keen for some muffins and stuff, which I haven't got out of her yet, but I'm sure I will do shortly.
Over in Sumner, Ivan's checking out the firewalls, the steel girders and wooden framing that has gone up on Jane Patterson's build. That's next on Your New Home. Years ago, Mum and Dad's home was built by Fowlers. I remember how proud the builder was. Now, years later, Fowlers are building my own home. And our builder has that same pride in everything he does. Because at Fowlers, their people make the difference. Generation after generation.
Your style of living, your style of builder. Fowler Homes.
Hi, I'm Dustin, and when it comes to building consents, this is my advice. Woohoo, it's in, and it's often a great milestone to get to that point. With regards to building consents, obviously we've got 4 active councils throughout Canterbury, and they all vary in terms of their ability to get through the workload. And let's face it, there's a lot going on in Christchurch at the moment in the Greater Canterbury area, so they're all under extreme pressure. The important thing to remember though is that building consent is a process in itself, and it has to be followed by the local authorities. The duration at the moment would be about 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes 8 weeks really for some councils. The complexity of your home and the design and even where you're building will impact on your building consent and its duration. But I think as a whole at the moment, based on the amount of work we've got happening in Canterbury, I think all of the councils are doing their utmost to ensure that that process is followed correctly, which is really in your best interest anyway, and that the process is done in a reasonably timely fashion. Really important, again, your design has a reflection on the consent and the location. Patience is a virtue with building consents.
Back in Sumner, Ivan's taking a look around Jane's house. The foundations have been poured and the framing for the ground floor is in place. Already, the layout of the house is starting to take shape.
We're standing here just looking, imagining what it's like to walk in the house. There's a steel beam on the ground there, which is approximately where the concrete path's going to be. So the client will gain access to the house by coming down, and they'll step up onto a timber deck area just to give some texture change between hard concrete surface and natural timber. And being close to the beach, it's nice to add that in. So where I'm standing here now is effectively in the entranceway, and as a guest in this house will come in and we'll shoot up the stairs. The stairs are in this space here. And on this wall here is a full height 2-storey window, just beaming in lots of natural light into this whole entranceway and making the stair feel light and airy, because this whole area is like an atrium. It's open, which is quite common in modern design now.
Jane's section required a bespoke site-specific plan to make the best use of the views and available sunlight.
And so I'm walking through what is effectively, in my mind, the client's hallway. And then just where this bit of timber's lying on the ground is basically the master bedroom. There's not much goes in master bedrooms these days other than windows and doors, but you know, the view that she's got even at this height, which is only slightly elevated, maybe 400 millimetres higher than the floor itself, is out to the ocean. I reckon that's pretty cool. It's pretty unique in New Zealand to have an ocean view like that. So now we're back in the entranceway, and there's a large window here to what will be a landscaped area outside. Where effectively Jane will end up with a clothesline down that line there. And this end of the house is primarily got two guest bedrooms and a large walk-in storage room, which effectively comes underneath the stair. And then down the end here is the guest bathroom and the main downstairs bathroom for the guests. There's a large sliding door coming on this wall here, and this is Jane's allotment. But hard to completely picture, because like I said earlier, we're looking through walls and we can't really get perception. But as a builder and someone who's designed the house from the ground up, I've got a pretty good understanding, and I believe it'll work extremely well for them.
So your foundations, when you laid them, were they different from before?
They were certainly different to what we had originally planned, because this was pre-earthquake when the original designs were drawn up, and obviously with post-earthquake the code changed, and I'm in the TC2 area, so we needed to have special foundations, not as special as those in the TC3 area, but definitely they had to meet the requirements for the area. So there were changes, and obviously they were more expensive as a consequence. That's one of the benefits, that the house now complies with the latest code. So one hopes we don't have any more earthquakes, but you only have to look at San Francisco and we know it.
So the footprint to the house, was this your idea, Jane?
Well, again, because of the size of the section, it's a very long, thin section, and recession lines and things like that, I was very limited what I could do. So we've kept exactly the same footprint. That was to be able to go through the building consent process without having to get neighbours to approve things. We wanted to keep it as simple as possible. And the original house was incredibly well designed, so it pretty much follows the same ideas, with lots of light, big windows to maximise the view.
I think it's very, very clever how Ivan's worked with you to maximise the sun.
Well, sun's really important to me, and one of the things that has worked really well is that Ivan worked closely with the architect and myself, and because he understood the decisions from a building perspective in terms of cost, because obviously, I was not working, I had a finite budget. So it was a good combination of having, the architect, Ivan and myself. I actually arrived, they did laugh at me when I first fronted up, because, coming from corporate life, I'd written a fairly in-depth brief, and Ivan still got it actually, but he was quite amused when this is, it's a reflection of my background, I guess. Excellent. It was quite funny.
We're in the garage, it's a typical beachfront garage perhaps, and it's long, so it'll take 2 cars. This block wall, we have to have this really for fire. Fire spread when houses are quite close together is a real concern. If you talk to a fireman, as I have in the past, the heat generated by a burning building on the opposite side, let alone the house itself, is just immense. It's massive. You could be sort of 10 metres away and barely be able to stand there. So what this is designed to do is to stop fire spread from the garage and the house, for that matter, spreading into that other house. It's a bit over the top. You can do it with different products, but we chose to use block on this house because it's permanent, and we know that it's going to be permanent for years and years to come. You can see the size of this beam, and it's spanning quite a distance from the front of the garage almost through to the rear of it, and that's carrying the top story outside wall weight. So it's carrying quite a bit of weight. That's why it's the size it is. You know, there's a lot of talk in Canterbury about the rising sea levels, in fact throughout the world, with global warming, perceived or not. So we have to have a finished floor height that's suitable, that if we do get sea rise, as they predict, that the house won't flood, because otherwise it becomes insurance issues. The other issues here, particularly in this location, is we have to fit in with what they call SAM, another acronym in our building industry, special amenities. And the council require houses in this location to have a certain look about them. This particular house, because it's a rebuild, we had to fit it within an envelope. We couldn't exceed certain parts of it. Even the windows that were in the old house literally had to be rebuilt into the new house. Although it's not a direct replica, you can sort of understand the confusion there, because here we are building a new house to the client's specific requirements, which is sort of based on the old house, but has to fit within a quite tight guideline of rules whilst giving them something new.
Council regulations affect every aspect of the build.
For the foundations, to give you an idea, we had the council's involvement is to check all the sewer falls and wastes, that everything's falling in the right directions. Then we have a surveyor to confirm the floor height, and that the floor height is at the exact same level that it should be, so it doesn't poke through recession planes. So that's the first stage, and now we're in the siding stage. We're actually building the structure. We're building the shell of the house. And this particular one sitting here ready to receive the top floor joists and some more structural steel to make it both compliant and add some aesthetics to the exterior. We always point out to clients, ideally don't make changes after we start. Try and make as many as you feasibly can before we start. That way they won't be faced with the delay, the frustration and the cost of the changes. And imminently most people make incremental changes that matter very little to the overall, but if they want them, we'll do them. But we just explain to them this is the laborious nature of the industry we work in.
The road cones are out and the concrete trucks arrived at Jadine's house.
Yeah, so once the concrete's done, framing is next, really. So within a couple of days we'll have some framing that'll turn up and we'll be able to start straight away. The guys will mark out where the frames are going to go on the floor, and away they go, they're into it.
But the clock's ticking. They're just hours to complete the pour before the road reopens for rush hour traffic. Years ago, Mum and Dad's home was built by Fowlers. I remember how proud the builder was. Now, years later, Fowlers are building my own home. And our builder has that same pride in everything he does. Because at Fowlers, their people make the difference. Generation after generation.
Your style of living, your style of builder. Fowler Homes.
Hi, it's Ivan here, top tip of the day. And today I want to talk about foundations. The single most important part of your house, like your marriage, like your schooling, without good foundations this isn't going to work. Christchurch has undergone a major change in requirements for foundations due to the earthquakes. It's probably something we should have known beforehand, but we didn't. But however, what we know now is we have to do a lot more underneath your home, and the cost of doing that's much higher, hence the cost of buildings rising. Simply put, the base of your house now sits on a raft of shingle, and on top of that sits a polystyrene pod floor. The one we use is an allied super slab, and it actually is our standard at Fowler Homes. We don't consider that this living in more suitable ground conditions means you don't have a stronger floor slab. We really believe it's good advice to clients to actually put your house on a very strong foundation so that in future events, which we're going to be having, your house will stand up much better. And something you may not be aware of is that for every time you have damage from a future earthquake event, you're going to be charged a higher 5% of the damage will be charged to you as excess. So in some cases it could be quite high, so the additional cost of a stronger foundation is money well spent. That's my tip of the day.
And And speaking of foundations, back at Jadine's house, the concrete truck is on its way.
So now that we've got to this stage, the boxing's all completed, the steel is all in, the polystyrene pods are in. They're creating the ribraft system that we're using today for most of our builds. We've had a council inspection, which is all good, so they've ticked it off and confirmed that we've constructed it the way we're supposed to and in line with the consenting plans. And we've also had a surveyor in first thing this morning just to make sure that the house is in the right place, which it is.
Yes, you heard right. It is important to get the house in the right spot.
Is that if the house is not in the right spot and the surveyor picks up on it, you've literally got to shift it. The only other way that you might not have to do that is if it's still within the rules and regulations for site coverage. It could be okay, but you'd have to amend the plans, send that through to the council and just let them know that it's not quite right. But generally speaking, the surveyors are in here before we box it up and then they're back here again once we've boxed it up. So you got 2 double checks really to make sure that you do get it in the right place.
It's been hard for Jadine to visualise her finished house from just looking at the foundations.
Yeah, right from the start, seeing just the outline when they dug out in the foundations, it looked ginormous. The perimeter of the house, it looked huge. I couldn't believe it.
Exciting.
Yeah, and then when you actually, you know, as we've gone through with the foundations, and then when the final part of actually knowing the perimeter and actually being able to walk around and go, that's going to be my room, that's Mitty's room, and
visualise the garden.
kitchen.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. So the new foundations that you've got, the new system foundations, did that affect your budget or for the build, or?
No, I had exactly the same question for Dustin, because I thought, you know, with things been changing in that throughout the process, that it would start to eat into the budget for the house that was allocated, but no, it's not. So we've still got absolutely fantastic foundations, and it hasn't eaten into that budget for the house.
Back at Jadine's house, the concrete truck has arrived with a special attachment. It's a boom that enables the concrete mixer to remain stationary alongside the foundations while the concrete gets directly to the precise location where it's required in the foundations. From the boom, the concrete can be spread easily and efficiently by the building team.
So once it's been poured, there'll be the places will be floating it off later, so they'll have a big machine which they'll literally sit on top of the floor and make it all nice and smooth and shiny. Well, not shiny, but smooth. And that'll take much of the day for that to happen. We do put an additive in the concrete, particularly in winter time, like this when it's a bit colder. So if we don't put the additive in, the concrete will take too long to go off, which means it takes too long to go hard. So we'll put an additive in, the concrete will go hard within sort of 3 or 4 hours, and then by the end of the day, it'll be ready. Yeah, so once the concrete's done, framing is next, really. So within a couple of days, we'll have some framing that'll turn up, and we'll be able to start straight away. The guys will mark out where the frames are going to go on the floor, and away they go, they're into it.
It's a race against time to get the concrete from the truck through the boom and into the foundations before the road needs to be reopened for rush hour traffic. Next time on Your New Home, the framing goes up on Jadine's home and the second story rises on Jane's build. It's tool belts on and nail guns on charge on Your New Home.